Hi, Daniel. How's it going?
Hey Tia, it's going well. How are you?
Good. Good to see you. It's been a long time. I think we talked back in, was it was it January? It might have even been, I think it was January.
Yeah, it was early
Been
this
super
year.
busy.
Yeah, yeah, early this year. We've been busy, you've been busy, so it's nice to see you again.
Yeah, you too. So what's new? Like what's been the latest?
Well, gosh, a lot of things. I think the nice thing about, because we're essentially a professional services based company, right? So we
Yeah.
we have a technology platform which allows scalability and access to more people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford like in-person type training. But we are very much professional services, and so there's one nice thing that has emerged and evolved in 2024, which is that I think more people are expressing more interest in wanting to share space together again.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I don't know.
Especially in the world right now, everybody needs you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's so it's been nice. We've had more opportunities to be in person with people, and even share time virtually, but live. So that we're actually in people's presence. So adding that,
So you're traveling around.
right, right, right. So adding that element to, the e-learning platform that we designed has been a nice shift for this year.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like I have so much to ask you, and I could talk about what you do all day, and I don't want to take up that much of your time. So I'll just start with the basics, and I would love to just hear about you personally, and then let's get into All Truth and what All Truth does. But let's start with you and how awesome you are because you have a really cool background. I was stalking you and just reading about some of the really cool stuff that you've done. So just love to hear that. And I'm sure other people would love to kind of hear how you got started and a little bit about you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Tia. It's nice to know somebody's stalking me. So, yeah, I definitely have a kind of an interesting way that I have that my professional life has evolved and that I've gotten into the work that I'm doing now. I'm not sure if you remember, but I'll share for everyone else. I had a kind of a big pivotal shift professionally post George Floyd. So all of my volunteer life for the past 25 years has been dedicated to issues of equity and race and connection and ending racism and mentoring young people, particularly Black and Brown youth. And so it's always been a passion of mine. The marriage of my profession with my passion happened post George Floyd. I owned an athletic performance, training facility. One of my clients had is it was a so and is a social media fitness influencer. Had like 1.5 million followers. And she's
Oh,
white.
yes. I think we,
We did,
yes, we
yeah.
came to the conclusion that we had this friend in common
Yes,
in
yes,
Seattle.
yeah,
Yes. And
yes.
are we allowed to name her? I think we're allowed to say it's Kaisa, right? Because she's
Okay,
just
all
that
right.
cool,
That's
right?
yep, yep. That's yeah. She's
Rachel.
totally. She's wonderful, and
Yes.
and I give a lot of credit to how my life has shifted and evolved to her, and because of kind of some of the things that happened somewhat randomly, but it
Yeah.
really worked out for the best for me personally. Anyway,
Yeah.
she's white, and she put out this statement: all white people were racist right after George Floyd. She lost a lot of followers. Her and I were talking about it the next day. I'm the guy who loves talking about race, and so like yes, bring it on. I was helping her to understand a little bit more about the dynamics of all of it, and so then we did a one-on-one conversation on her Instagram, and a lot of people saw it. She decided that it would probably be good for me to start my own and to help people talk about the issue. And I was at first I'm like, social media was not my thing, but I decided to do it.
Yeah.
It was a great experience. I had more conversations on the topic of race between George Floyd and the end of 2020, so for about 6 months, than I had in the previous 25 years. And I'm somebody who talks about it all the time. So
Yeah.
I had lots of conversations. And by the end of the year, I realized that there was some dots that I had not connected. some things that were still a little uncertain, up in the air. I wasn't sure about in terms of how we were moving to solve for all of the issues that racism has caused, and
Mhm.
even beyond just racism, really identity-based conflict. And so randomly, someone who was connected to my business at the time, my gym, um, was had followed my Instagram, and she was a part of an organization that had been doing training around ending racism for like 30 years and other forms of identity-based conflict. Invited me in to do a workshop in January of 2021. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't think it was going to be anything different. I'd been, to a lot of workshops before, hundreds of them, and but it totally changed everything for me. So it changed how I understood, myself and all of us, and how we can really create solutions around a lot of the identity-based division, race being one, but there's lots of others.
Sure,
How we can actually
absolutely.
create solutions and how we can minimize or mitigate the impacts on ourselves and each other. And so I started working with them quite a bit more, and then we came together to build out this e-learning platform, and that's how All Truth was born. So
I love that. And that, I mean, there's no greater way than to kind of have something like that come to fruition just from kind of the need and the experience that you're living at the moment. And then it just kind of organically happens, which it kind of seems like that's how it happened for you. Um, but I think it's interesting because All Truth talks about, there was an old way of introducing DEI into the workplace or wherever you wanted to have these conversations that were coming, as you said, after George Floyd.
Mhm.
Um, but for some reason, it wasn't always working. Or even before George Floyd, people were not really listening or not really absorbing it. And so All Truth is trying to find a new way to have the conversation, to sit down with people and find ways to connect and realize that we all have a lot more in common than we
Mhm.
do that it's different. So I would love for you to kind of speak to how All Truth is doing this differently.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, and I really give praise to my co-founders of All Truth, Dustin and Martin and Madi, who really in 2017, they had been working, like I said, 20, 25 years in the space, recognized that there were some things that were not clicking, some things that were not working, that they themselves were not in alignment with their lives, were not in alignment with what they were preaching. They weren't as healthy as they could be. The people that here we've been, and I was a part of this too, because I've been parts of lots of training before. And like I said, I mean, I always talked about it. Here we are trying to help change the world and help other people shift and change, but there was things that we needed to work on personally.
Hmm.
And so we
Hmm.
really a deep dive into the inwardly focused work that needed to happen before we can start to shift outward. And so one of the things you mentioned is that we changed how, we approach the work, whereas a lot of other DEI work, wasn't quite creating it wasn't as effective as we'd like to see it. I think part of that comes from the energy around how it started, right? And really, DEI is just the latest acronym for the work that started post civil rights movement. And
Right.
most of that work really until the way I like to break up the kind of the eras
Right.
is, and some things shifted and changed when Obama was elected, and
Right.
then when the smartphone grew, so everybody had cameras, right? So the civil rights movement was largely effective because of the news cameras in the South, right? So,
Right.
previous to that, 80% of white Americans were not in support of the work that Martin Luther King was doing, right? It wasn't until people
Uh-huh.
from the North realized what was happening, then they were like, oh, wow, okay. And so a lot of the energy around, shifting the dynamic and helping to end injustice and change how we interacted with each other in all of our systems and neighborhoods and communities and all that was really born out of this idea of fighting against what was wrong, right?
Right.
So we become really, really good at talking about the problem, really good at
Mhm.
talking about what caused the problem, all of the places in our history that have been ignored, that have led to a continuation of the problem. But we really haven't been good at focusing in on the solution or the kind of community or society that we want to create, right?
Mhm.
So our approach really, it really asks people to pause for a moment and to ask how, let's just take race as one form of identity-based conflict that we have in this country. But it asks the question, really, how have you been negatively impacted by racism, and what could you do to end that impact, right? And
Mhm.
so it forces you to change your perspective a little bit on what this is. It gives you a little bit more power, and that was what my co-founders did for me. I'd never felt a sense of control and power and inspiration around this topic. It was always too big. There's too many elements to it.
Right.
It's like I can't, you
Yeah.
know, I can't wrap my brain around it. I can so um, that element of
And
power.
everybody can answer that question, no matter what your background is,
Oh,
because
everybody.
you and nobody really sits to think about how it might have impacted them. And
Yeah.
I feel like you the same way. I mean, I didn't really start looking at this, and then you start thinking about your whole life, and then you're like, oh man, I guess that did happen. And I had a lot of that for myself too, as a mixed race person. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, that's a really interesting question, and I think that's a really um, it's a good question to ask to bring people together because everybody's impacted by it, whether you're white or
Yep.
you're black or
Yeah.
everything in between. You have
Mhm.
been impacted by racism. So
Yep. Yep.
that's
No,
great. I love that.
100%. And all of us have been impacted negatively, right? We tend to think
Right.
of white folks
Exactly.
as having relative advantage, so it has not impacted them negatively, but it has,
Hmm.
right? We have
Hmm.
shaped this society based on this false idea, right? That some people are better than others simply because of what they look like, which
Hmm.
is, it's a house of cards, right? We simultaneously do that, but then construct the ideals of the nation that we live by in direct
Hmm.
contradiction to it. So it was bound to fall apart. And so we've really been seeing the last 40 years have been seeing the impact, and particularly on white men, that racism has had,
Yeah.
right? It tells white people that the only value that they have is because they're white, right? And so then here we are in a place where, you know, folks have to seek and like, okay, if the value of whiteness is really something that was made up, then who am I? What value do I have? What value do I bring? Where do I fit in all of this? And it's a deep subconscious really condition that we've all yeah,
Yeah. And
right. We've
yeah.
all absorbed these ideas that we are either better or worse than someone else because of the way we look, right? And so we're having to grow through that now. And so there's effective ways to do it, and there's ineffective ways to do it. And so I am of the belief that what we are doing is an effective form of growing through these ideas and becoming the kind of community and society that in which we all feel of equal value, and we can all express ourselves authentically, and that this
Yeah.
idea that identity has value just is gone. It fades away.
Yeah.
Right.
100%. Well,
So
so I know, so there, it's an e-learning platform. And so how do you deliver your content? Or say I'm a company and I want to get in touch with you. How do I pick the person I want to deliver this content, and who is delivering it on your end?
yeah, so this is really about training and development. So it's kind of in the learning and development space, and so normally the HR lead or somebody in DEI. By the way, we should also probably talk about what's happened in DEI the last year and a
Oh my
half.
God, please can we? And that's,
So
I feel
we
like I
can
need a
definitely talk
second
about that too.
podcast with you for that because, or second interview with you for that because that is like a whole thing. I feel like
Yeah,
we could spend an hour on that too.
yeah, yeah.
But
We should
yes,
definitely. we should definitely touch on it briefly here if we
Yeah.
can talk later
Okay.
more. But
Just
so any
for
yeah, so anyway, it's HR or the DEI department normally is the one tasked with learning and development.
Yep.
And so the SaaS-based platform, the e-learning platform, is just one part of what we do. The most exciting piece that, at least that I feel we offer, is that we really try to couple live connection with the people that are facilitating all of the learning in the e-learning modules to really support this
Mhm.
journey. This is about growth. It's continued growth. It's not a transactional approach, right? We don't
Right.
just pick up and do one lesson and then everything is clear and now everything is solved. Um, this is it's kind of a therapeutic process, right? We've all been conditioned in ways that have been harmful. We've been
Mhm.
taught things about ourselves and other people that keep us divided and separated. And in order to break those patterns and those habits that are leading to unhealthy, um, you know ineffective ways of working and being, then we need support. So the e-learning platform is one piece, and then we have a lot, virtual, live virtual support, and then in person as well. So the way to
Okay.
get, yeah, to get a hold of it. So if you're somebody who is in HR, or if you're in DEI, or if you're tasked, or if you're in exec and you just want your team to grow, right? Then totally reach out to us. The easiest way is, we work with everyone pretty specifically regarding the need that they have. And
Mhm.
so, and everybody's needs are slightly different, which is, it's okay. It's okay for us. And so we want to learn more about you, and and anything that, your organization, any dynamics that your organization comes with, and then we try to meet you where you are.
That's
So,
great.
so they
You
can.
kind of tailor to what's happening within a company and
Hmm.
kind of start there
Hmm.
and break it off into smaller pieces or whatever you need to do.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. For sure.
That's great.
So do you want to touch on DEI since it's been, a hot
Just do it a
topic?
little bit because it is just a topic right now
Yeah.
that's it's firing me up. So yeah, please do that.
Do you remember what happened with CRT post George Floyd?
Yes, yes, I do.
So there's a number of
And
dynamics.
maybe
Just
even describe that just for people who might not
yeah,
because that
yeah. So critical race theory is a high level of academic study, typically taught in
in
college,
law.
in college. Yeah, mostly in sociology. Started in 1973 officially, I believe, either 72 or 73. And it was really a way to describe intersectionality, and that the different marginalized communities and different things that are happening in our society are, it's really difficult to be able to take one piece, one individual, or one individual identity, and separate it from the other elements and the other ways that we're impacted by maybe different identities, or how economics plays a role in race and all of these things, right? Because previous to the civil rights movement, let's just say, because civil rights movement kind of officially ended in 71. um, but previous to that, the only description of racism and a racist or whatever that people had, was kind of like this segregationist, Ku Klux Klan and all that kind of stuff, right? But what academics realized is that, well, if we were just to get rid of all of the, Ku Klux Klan members in our society, we would still have vastly unjust systems, and racism would still plague us, and so it was a way to describe it. So what happened post George Floyd was that there were some folks who really responded um, in a way that showed and revealed that we are still a very racially disempowered nation. And
Hmm.
so the idea of what critical race theory meant was dangerous to some people, right?
Hmm.
And you have to remember how all of this started. Race is only 300 officially 1705 was like when the first time race became a thing officially. So it took about 80 years to create it. It's a social construct. We just made it up, and the people that made it up were the colonial gentry, right?
Right.
The British gentry, in order to divide people. So a very small group of wealthy, powerful, influential people needed to divide the servant class, in order to control, for the purpose of control. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, we still have a little bit of that dynamic going on, right? So that when people are divided and when we are in conflict, we are easier to control. And so, really taking a deep dive at what race means, and um, how to grow through racism can be very threatening to some people. And so you had this backlash, right, against what kind of what the racial uprisings post George Floyd. Now, the other thing I will say is that one of the responses to George Floyd by um, secondary school districts, well, let's just say primary and secondary school districts around the country, was to increase the amount of education around race, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that were delivering this education were not equipped to be able to do it effectively for everyone. Okay,
Right.
and so if critical race theory is really designed for collegiate level sociological study.
Right.
If
Which everybody, in a sense, and I think about it this way too. I majored in sociology
Mhm.
by choice, but having gone through that, and the reason I did it was because people are fascinating. What makes them tick? If you can get
Mhm.
to the root of that, you can really do anything. You can do any
Yeah,
job.
yeah.
But you know what? I feel like everybody, just like when you're in school, it's like you got to take math, you got to take science. Everybody should learn about people, and that's where you learn
Hmm.
about all of this stuff because so many people had never heard of a lot of this stuff until George Floyd, at least our generation, right?
Hmm.
Like he
Hmm.
was our, you know, Emmett Till of our
Hmm.
generation.
Yeah, yeah.
It probably was never top of mind for anybody our age
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
our parents were actively talking about it unless you were of a brown family or a black family.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
wasn't coming up in homes.
Yeah, right,
Sorry, I
right,
cut you off, but
right.
continue.
No, no, yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, so then, there was this large influx of people who really were not equipped to be able to teach us about how to overcome what racism has, how it's impacted us and what it's done to us, who started teaching. And so, when you're not equipped to engage everyone, by everyone I mean everyone. So you vote, whether you vote red or blue, whether you're white,
Mhm,
black, or anything in between, whether you live in a rural community or an urban community, if you're not prepared to be able to discuss how to overcome the impact of racism with everyone, then
mhm.
you'd probably need to find someone who can
Right,
do that.
right.
Now, and I understand school districts don't always have those resources, but that was part of the issue too that we saw,
Mhm,
which also, I do want to say that, like, the same thing kind of happened in the large expansion of DEI, is that there was a lot of people who were doing training and who are doing workshops and who really have been in the past who are really not equipped or prepared to teach everyone how to
mhm.
overcome this,
Yeah,
right? And
right.
and so one of the things that we did in this process of, like, kind of relearning how to do this work effectively is look at what we've done and what we've been doing. And a lot of the language that we've used in the past is not inclusive, right? We talk about wanting to be inclusive, but it needs to be inclusive for everyone. So whether if I'm somebody who lives in if I'm white and I live in a rural community and I vote red, I need to be able to understand how I've been damaged and how racism has impacted me and my family and everyone, and why it's important that we grow through it and that it no
Mhm,
longer plagues us. Just like someone who lives in an urban community who maybe the child of an immigrant, from Argentina, or right? All of us need to be able to understand how we fit and how we've been conditioned and damaged. And so we
And
can
where it started and how long ago it started, because
totally,
it's,
yeah,
even
absolutely.
I went to the African American Museum, a
Hmm.
couple years after it opened, and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know half of this
Hmm.
stuff.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
it's good to know.
Yeah, well, I mean, history, really understanding how to grow through all this is really a combination of history, sociology, psychology, and then just general overall like respect, kindness,
Where has
humanness.
that gone?
Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah,
sad. We've gotten so far away from empathy too, to just
right.
have it for each other and to teach people about empathy, because clearly we need a lesson.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
right.
so, and actually, to ask you, is this something that, if a company is like, hey, can you just come in and like, let's talk about the history and like, let's start at the beginning? Is that something that you guys can do too? Where it's like, all right, let's start at the very start of this. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what we have the most experience doing. Right. And
Yeah.
so I do want to just say for everybody that DEI was unfairly labeled. Okay, in the same way
Yeah.
that CRT was. Right. And it's because of a lot
Right.
of dynamics, but DEI was unfairly labeled. Most of the people who felt threatened by DEI didn't really understand what DEI is, right? And what it
Right.
does, and what are the inner workings of it. And so, in combination with practitioners not doing their self work, with outsiders and people who feel threatened, all of that, and in a very kind of explosive political environment, now where identity based conflict is at the root of our division. um, it just made for this hotbed waiting to explode. And so a lot of the performative efforts that you saw companies making, so like a lot of people were like, after George Floyd, companies were like, oh gosh, we haven't done anything. Where have we been? Why were we so unprepared for this? How could we be so unequipped to deal with what was going on right in front of us? So let's hire a chief diversity officer and um, add a diversity, equity, and inclusion department, and then we're going to be good. And then we'll check the box and not have to think about it anymore, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of those efforts have gone by the wayside because they're performative, right? If
Uh-huh.
if you're not if you're
Mhm.
not taking an active look at what DEI is, what it can do for you, how it can make you more profitable, how it can make you more effective, how you can retain more of your workforce, how you can become more risk averse. If you're not
Right.
looking at like how this is tied to your actual business model, it's going to go away.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
really that's what we've seen. So yes, if you
Yeah.
ever want to spend an hour talking about it, we could.
Yeah. We might have to do part two just because it's so interesting.
Yeah,
Um, okay, but we will kind of stop it there, and then maybe I will kind of bug you later for part two on
no
that.
problem. No
But
problem.
um, because there's so much learning, and that's the
Hmm.
cool thing about it. It's like there's no harm in learning about this stuff and understanding, to make everybody feel more included.
Hmm.
So, um, I guess the last question I will ask you
Hmm.
is just kind of as a founder, what's kind of been your biggest kind of hurdle starting All Truth, or anything that you would advice you would have for other people starting out, just in general, that you would
Yeah.
share?
Well, I'll speak from kind of the 30,000 foot view of just being in business for yourself in general. I've been in business for myself for almost 20 years. And I think, the tough part, it doesn't matter what business you're in. It's all hard. Okay. So, like some people say, well, oh yeah, gosh, that's like, the restaurant business, oh, it's really tough, or the grocery store business or the tech business, it's all hard. Right.
Hmm.
Um, and the management of the peaks and troughs, I think, is really the key, So it's always going to take longer than you want. Rule number one, okay? It's absolutely a marathon. As long as you don't quit, as long as you stay in the game, you figure out a way to stay in the game,
Yep.
you're going to be okay. You really have to expand your network and you have to tap your resources and count on the people that have always been there for you, you know. Um, you hopefully you have some sense of how to manage money.
Yeah, that would help.
hmm That helps. But it's kind of funny we say that, but the truth is that we don't learn how to manage money until we actually do it, right? There's no
Hmm.
process in our educational system
That's
that
so true.
that's effective in helping us learn how to really manage our
Mhm.
finances and plan. And so here we are, like, now we really don't have an effective tool of even managing our own finances. Here we are starting a company, and we're expected to manage not only our own, but the companies and everyone else's. And
Right, and then all your employees.
yeah, yeah,
So
it can be
good.
tough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say, just for the sake of time to you, is that I really loved Michael Gerber's E-Myth book, and I still use
Mhm.
it to this day. But there's so many of us that um, believe that because we are technicians, because we have perfected one particular skill, that we can run a business based on that skill. And those are two different things.
Yeah,
Maintaining and having the skill is one thing. Running a business that is profitable be, based on that skill is another thing.
that's a really good point.
So,
I like that one. We should turn
yeah.
that into a book.
It
I like that
wouldn't be
one.
mine, it'd be his.
Yeah, great. Okay, but yeah, it's a good perspective though, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, well then the last thing I want to ask you, and you already kind of said this, but I just want to keep it top of mind for everybody. If they want to get in touch with All Truth and work with you guys, what's the best way to do that?
Well, our website is probably the best. So all dash truth.com. So all dash truth.com. And we can get a hold of any of us. There's ways to go on the site and see samples of what we do and sign up for demos and reach out to us individually and personally. We love talking about this stuff. We are very passionate about it. We really are looking forward to the day that all of us have rid ourselves of the impacts of so many of these identity-based conflicts that we have.
Yeah,
It's always top of mind, and so we're always willing just to even have a conversation. If somebody has thoughts,
that's great.
even if you don't want to engage with us, uh, from a business perspective, you just want to talk, that we're up for that too. So,
Love that. Okay, well, that's great. I hope actually maybe you would come back and do a part two because I feel like there's so much we can touch on. So
yes,
I'll
yes,
be just
absolutely.
trying to bug you for that. But
No
thank
problem.
you for talking to me today. And we look forward to hearing more about All Truth and where you guys go from here.
No problem. Thanks to you.
Thanks, Daniel.
hmm